The House Oversight Committee has advanced legislation that contains cuts to federal employees' benefits, but I think there's been some misunderstandings about what this really means. So let's take a look at the details. Hi everyone, I'm Ian Smith with fedsmith.com. Thank you for watching today. In my last video, I went over legislation that was being considered in the House Oversight Committee that made a number of cuts to federal employees' benefits. And it was being considered in a markup session on this past Wednesday, April 30th. And that session has now taken place. The committee voted on the legislation and they did advance it. And it's now going to go to the House Budget Committee for further consideration. But let's dig into the details of what's going on. So the House Oversight Committee was tasked with cutting $50 billion from the federal budget. And the legislation they came up with, which was called the committee print, primarily did this by proposing a number of cuts to federal employees' benefits. And as I said, the legislation advanced yesterday out of the committee's markup session. So what is a markup session? Well, according to the House of Representatives website, it states this, quote, after hearings are completed, the bill is considered in a session that is popularly known as the markup session. Members of the committee study the viewpoints presented in detail. Amendments may be offered to the bill, and the committee members vote to accept or reject these changes. So that's basically what was going on yesterday in this session. Nothing has really changed in the legislation, but we do have some additional details about some of the items. So just a quick recap of what's in this legislative package. It would raise the FERS contribution rate to 4.4% for all federal employees. It would eliminate the FERS annuity supplement. It would switch from a high 3 to a high 5 average salary for pension calculations. It would include FEHB protection audits to remove ineligible employee dependents in order to save money within the FEHB. That's the Federal Employees Health Benefits Program. Now, a couple items with some new info that was presented yesterday. There's an MSPB filing fee that's being proposed, and it would charge federal employees a $350 fee for filing MSPB appeals to reduce frivolous claims. The fee would be refunded to federal employees who win their appeals. When I did my video before and reported on this before, I did not know the amount of the fee, but that came out in some information presented yesterday. The last item in this legislation is there's an option for new hires to elect at-will employment in exchange for higher take-home pay with a lower FERS contribution rate. If the new hires were to accept the at-will status, their FERS contribution rate would be 4.4%. If they opt to retain their civil service protections, however, they pay a higher rate. It would add 5% to their FERS contribution rate for a total of 9.4%. And that 5% figure, that's some new information that I did not have before when I covered this. So in the vote and the debate on the legislation yesterday, Democrats opposed it across the board, but there was one Republican on the committee who opposed it as well. And that was Congressman Mike Turner, Republican from Ohio. He was opposed to the legislation package because of cutting pensions for federal employees. He didn't like that. In a statement he posted on X, he wrote, quote, the goal of reconciliation should be to reduce overall government spending by eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, and reducing needless and unnecessary spending. I oppose any and all efforts to reduce federal spending by taking money from the hard-earned pensions of federal workers. Employee benefits are not a gift. They are earned. I will not support and will not vote for the Oversight Committee's current budget reconciliation proposal reducing earned pension benefits for current federal employees. And Turner actually wrote and posted that prior to the vote in this markup session, just for clarification. But something else interesting to note, he also thinks that the pension cuts to which he's opposed will not stay in this bill as it works through the legislative process. Here's a clip of something he said in the committee markup session yesterday. Play the clip.
I have talked to enough people on the House floor that I do think that this will not be included in the final bill, and that this bill ultimately will have to be changed if it's going to be included in the ultimate budget reconciliation. So I will be voting no, and I certainly hope that this process, as it goes through, will be changed, because I do not think that it is fair, and it represents either Republican values or American values. I think that we as a party stand up for pensions, and I don't think that we should say to the American public that we will change someone's pension in the middle of the process of their employment. I yield back.
So as you can see, based on other members of Congress, or at least in the House that he's spoken to, he doesn't think that this one provision will make it into the final bill. He may be right, I don't know. But that brings me to my final point. There's been a lot of misunderstandings and misinformation, I think, about this legislative package that I wanted to just mention. And I understand that it's a complex process, but some of the comments and emails that we've received indicate the confusion surrounding this. For instance, some people have asked if the provisions in the legislation will impact them given their specific details of their situations. That's an understandable question, and they're worried about cuts to their pensions and whatnot, so they want to know. Other comments or questions have asked, so when is the date that this takes effect? Well, it's important to keep in mind these are just proposals. What happened yesterday, when this advanced out of the committee, it is not law now. These provisions are not about to go into effect. They're not set in stone. As the comments from Congressman Turner indicate, there's still more to go in the legislative process. And as he was saying, he thinks that at least the provision about cutting pensions won't make it into the final bill. So it's important to remember these are just proposals. They may not become law. They may get changed along the way. So what's being discussed now could end up being different in the final product if it actually does become law. Also, we've been hearing about some of these proposals for a long time now, decades in some cases. The high five, the change from a high 3 to a high 5, that's one example. That goes back decades that I know of. On fedsmith.com, when I was researching this, I found articles over 10 years old that were talking about that change because it was being discussed in Congress at the time, and it still hasn't gone into effect. It still may not go into effect, even though it's being considered now. So after this budget legislation goes to the various committees, it still ultimately has to pass the House and the Senate, go through any changes they make, and be signed into law by the president. So it's a long process. And even if some of these proposals were to become law, as I said, they could be changed along the way. We don't know exactly how they'll be implemented. For instance, there could be grandfathering provisions in them. So they wouldn't affect current federal employees, but only future ones. That's something you might see. Also, once a new law comes out, it has to then be implemented, and OPM oftentimes will issue a notice to agencies outlining how they think a new law should be implemented. So it's a long process. It takes a while. It can change along the way. The point I'm trying to make, I guess, is don't panic right now. Just be informed. It does affect you, your pay and your benefits, so it is important. You want to pay attention to it, but just stay informed. Just watch the process. We'll have more details as it moves through the legislative process, as it gets closer to becoming law, again, if it gets to that point. And FedSmith will certainly keep you updated along the way so you can be aware of what's going on and ultimately make the best decision for you and your family. Thank you for watching today, and please remember to like and subscribe and visit our website for other articles on this and other topics with news that will impact you and your career. Have a good day.